The government has pledged to relax restrictions on building onshore wind farms in England after a threatened rebellion from Conservative MPs. A rule requiring new turbines to be built on pre-designated land will be rewritten, the Levelling Up Department said. Over 30 backbenchers had threatened to make the change through a planning bill going through Parliament. New wind farms would still be subject to local approval. The precise method of measuring local opinion will be part of a wider consultation which will conclude by next April. The rebellions had prompted the government to delay the progress of its Levelling Up bill through Parliament. Former Minister Simon Clarke, who led the rebellion on wind farms, said the concessions offered by the government were a really sensible package. He added that it would ensure decisions on new projects are made locally rather than have Whitehall rule it out. Labour's shadow Levelling Up Secretary Lisa Nandy said ministers had been forced into this position because they're too weak to stand up to another backbench rebellion. She said her party would need to see the detail, but warned against a possible fudge that leaves in place a very restrictive system for onshore wind. She added that Labour's own plan, under which the approvals process would be aligned with other energy infrastructure, would lead to a doubling of capacity. Planning rules rewrite. Under current planning rules, companies in England can only apply to build onshore wind turbines on land specifically identified for development in the land use plans drawn up by local councils. The guidance, introduced under former PM David Cameron in 2015, has led to a sharp decline in the number of sites granted approval. Rishi Sunak had promised to keep this effective ban in place during his unsuccessful summer campaign to replace Boris Johnson as Tory leader. In a statement, Housing Secretary Michael Gove said the government now intended to rewrite planning guidance to enable local areas to identify sites suitable for onshore wind. He added this would allow ministers to move away from the overly rigid requirement for onshore wind sites to be designated in a local plan. A consultation on this had previously promised by Mr. Johnson's government 3 months before he was ousted from office. Greenpeace called the government's reversal of the effective ban an absolute no-brainer. Onshore wind could have been designed as the perfect solution to the climate and energy crisis.
Investigators have quality leads in the killings of 4 students, Idaho police spokesperson says. Investigators have a lot of quality leads about last month's killings of 4 University of Idaho students in an off-campus house, even though they still haven't determined who killed them, an Idaho State Police spokesperson said Tuesday morning. We're still working through thousands of leads and tips, and we have quality information that we're working on. Idaho State Police spokesperson Aaron Snell told CNN about the case that has put the college town of Moscow on edge, with no arrests made or any motive announced. 3 women who lived in the off-campus house, as well as a boyfriend of one, were found stabbed to death on November 13th in the home in Moscow, appending a community that hadn't recorded a murder since 2015. The killed students were Kaylee Goncalves, 21, Madison Mogan, 21, Xana Kernadal, 20, and Kernadal's boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, 20. Police have not identified a suspect or found the murder weapon, which investigators believe to be a knife. Snell declined to specify what he meant by quality leads and information. His comments come amid frustration from victims' relatives and some in the community over what they say has been a slow release of investigative details. Authorities haven't announced or encouraged a reward in the case, Snell said, because they fear that will diminish the quality of future leads. At times, when there is a reward or money offered, the quantity and quality of tips actually degrade a little bit. And people try to Provide information that may not even be a reasonable tip, just to see if there's some money available to them, Snell said. Investigators have received more than 2,654 emailed tips, 2,770 phone tips, and more than 1,080 digital media submissions, Moscow police said Monday. Asked at what point this would be considered a cold case, Snell said that, "We're absolutely not there. We're continuously making progress," Snell said. "But this is a criminal investigation, and as we make progress, we can't always provide that information." Later that morning, 2 surviving roommates summoned friends to the residence because they believed one of the second-floor victims had passed out and was not waking up, police said in a release. Somebody called 911 from the house at 11:58 a.m. using one of the surviving roommates' phones. When police arrived, they found 2 victims on the second floor and 2 victims on the third floor. There was no sign of forced entry or damage, police said. A coroner determined the 4 victims were each stabbed multiple times and were likely asleep when the attacks began, police have said. The manner and cause of death were homicide by stabbing, the coroner said.
Suspect in Club Q mass shooting charged with 305 counts, including hate crimes and murder. The suspect accused of entering a Colorado gay nightclub clad in body armor and with an AR-15 style rifle, killing and wounding 17 others, was charged by prosecutors Tuesday with 305 criminal counts including hate crimes and murder. The counts against include 48 hate crime charges, 1 for each person known to have been in the club at the time of the shooting. During a hearing Tuesday, the 22-year-old defendant, who according to court papers filed by their attorney Eisen uses the pronouns they/them, sat upright in a chair and appeared alert. In an earlier court appearance just a few days after the shooting, the defendant was slumped over, head and face covered with bruises, and had to be prompted by attorneys to respond to questions from a judge. Investigators said the defendant entered Club Q, a sanctuary for the LGBTQ community in the mostly conservative city of Colorado Springs, just before midnight on November 19 and began shooting during a drag queen's birthday celebration. The killing stopped after wrestled the suspect to the ground, beating the defendant into submission, they said. Of the 48 hate crime charges, 27 counts involve injuries and 21 involve people fearing injury or property damage. In addition to those killed or wounded by gunfire at the club, police have said 5 people had non-gunshot injuries and other victims had no visible injuries. The defendant had been held on hate crime charges, but prosecutors had said previously they weren't sure if those counts would stick because they needed to assess if there was adequate evidence to show it was a bias-motivated crime. District Attorney Michael Allen had noted that murder charges would carry the harshest penalty, likely life in prison, but also said it was important to show the community that bias-motivated crimes are not tolerated if there was evidence to support the charge. At a news conference after the court hearing, Allen declined to discuss what evidence prosecutors found to back the hate crimes counts. However, he said a recent change in Colorado law allows offenders to be charged with hate crimes even if they are only partially motivated by bias. If it was not for that change, we would probably not be able to charge it in this case, he said. Allen said the suspect being non-binary was part of the picture in considering hate crime charges, but he wouldn't elaborate. We are not going to tolerate actions against community members based on their sexual identity, Allen said. Members of that community have been harassed, intimidated, and abused for too long. Judge Michael McHenry ordered the arrest warrant affidavit in the case to be unsealed on Wednesday, over the objections of defense attorney Joseph Archambault, who said he was concerned about the defendant's right to a fair trial due to publicity surrounding the case. The defendant was arrested at the club by police. They have not entered a plea or spoken about the events. According to witnesses, the defendant fired first at people gathered at the club's bar before spraying bullets across the dance floor during the attack, which came on the eve of an annual day of remembrance for transgender people lost to violence. Authorities have yet to explain why they didn't attempt to seize the defendant's guns under Colorado's red flag law after the defendant was accused of threatening to kill their grandparents if they stood in the way of the defendant's plans to become a mass killer. The defendant was booked into jail on suspicion of felony menacing and kidnapping. But it's unclear why the charges weren't pursued. Ring doorbell video obtained by the AP shows the defendant arriving at their mother's front door with a big black bag, telling her the police were nearby and adding, "This is where I stand. Today I die."